Oh, so yeah, I think this talk's be quite interesting for those who said they haven't contributed to open source and haven't made pull requests before. So this is the perfect talk to follow on from the previous one. So I'm going to talk a little bit how I got into open source. I'm sort of an open source enthusiast, constantly contributing to various open source projects online. I've been working with open source software since 2010, primarily Drupal, although with a few other things in there as well. I've contributed code to Drupal core. I'm a Drupal core contribution mentor, and I maintain various Drupal modules, as well as various other sort of Drupal open source related projects, like Drupal VM and the Drupal console. Various Ansible roles are all hosted on GitHub, as well as some of my own packages and libraries and applications that I've made publicly available. And I am one of over 1,300 contributors to Drupal 8 core as of now, which is pretty awesome. So why contribute to open source? The main reason for me is just wanting to pay it forward. There's a quote in the Drupal community that says there's a module for that. So if you've got a Drupal website and you want to plug it into MailChimp, there's a MailChimp module that provides that integration. If you want to plug it into Salesforce, there's a module for that. And most of the time, there'll be either a module that does exactly what you want or something that gives you something to build on, something that gives you maybe 90% of the way towards what you want. And essentially, I've made a career over the last 7 years supporting my family and developing myself using code that other people essentially have written. So I was hoping to encourage the next generation of developers by putting my stuff open for other people to use. To be part of a community, so my first few jobs I was either working for myself or as part of a very small team of developers, maybe 3 or 4 developers. But by contributing to open source, I'm part of a much larger community. So there's any given time there are thousands of people contributing to Drupal or contributing to other open source projects. This is something one of my colleagues actually wrote this week on LinkedIn. If you work in open source, you get thousands of extra colleagues. And there's always people on various IRC channels and various Slack channels that if I've got a problem with something within the module I'm writing, there's somebody I can ask a question of, or in most cases, I know the person who maintains that particular component, and I can ping them IRC directly and ask my question and get a response fairly quickly, most of the time. Be a better developer. So I've worked with developers who write code and maybe the indentation is all messed up and it's all very thrown together very quickly, let's say, for sort of private projects, for client projects. And then when we say we want to open source it, suddenly there's unit tests and suddenly it's following coding standards and all this type of stuff. Whereas if you're contributing to open source, you potentially got thousands of other developers reviewing your code on a continual basis. And also then if you're going into a situation where you're working as part of a team and they contribute, do pull requests and reviews, then that's not a new scenario. So I was sort of familiar with that sort of environment before doing it in a vocational environment, if that makes any sense. Better career prospects, so potential employers can look at my Drupal.org page, my profile, or my GitHub profile, see the code that I've been writing, and then that can be part of my validation, I guess, of I'm competent in doing particular things because they've got real examples of doing it. In fact, one of my first experiences of contributing to open source is when I was applying for a job, and I think at the 2nd or 3rd stage, they said, go into the Drupal issue queue, pick an issue, and then come and tell us how you fixed it, which was a really interesting scenario. I fixed it, which was awful. And then recognition. So this was great for me. I can go into my Drupal.org profile, and I can see the modules that I've committed to and the projects that I maintain. But also recently, actually, for my company. So particularly within the Drupal space, if we're working on issues for our employer, we can tag our employer in a commit, and then it will show up as me working for Appnovation have fixed this bug or made this issue. And actually, we can actually tag, if you're working on client projects, we can tag clients in there as well. So we've got a really nice overview now of how our ecosystem is made up. But initially, it was just for me, just so I can sort of. It's a good thing contributing to open source. It's very, very rewarding, personally. So getting started, I found this tweet last week, which I think pretty much covers it. File an issue on something you care about. So if you're involved in a particular project or a particular package, then that's probably the logical place to start. And filing an issue is important as well. Filing an issue is a contribution, so you don't have to write code. If you found an issue or a bug, then report it. Don't just put it to one side because it doesn't work properly. Then just make the maintainer aware that there is a bug. Help with input on other issues. When I've been contributing it or mentoring at contribution sprints, I've got a team of maybe 6 people sat on a table. This is one thing I try and get people helping each other out working in issues. So if one person's writing the patch, somebody else will be reviewing it. Or as the first step, maybe getting them to review other people's patches just to sort of familiarize themselves with the process rather than jumping in and trying to do too much at the same time. Dive into the code and offer a pull request, the other ones, or patches in this case. Mentoring. So most large projects, within Drupal, we have a very large mentoring, large group of mentors. So we are always there to assist new and inexperienced contributors. We hold various mentored code sprints. So at DrupalCon twice a year, and at various Drupal camps, we've got mentors on hand to help bring people to get up to speed with contribution. We regularly hold IRC and Slack office hours. So we have experienced mentors and contributors available to ask questions. We have a whole section on Drupal.org for core mentoring. We have PHPmentoring.org and other projects, things like Google Summer of Code. We still have these mentors available to help. Various different types of contribution, reporting and fixing bugs, I think is the main one. Reviewing existing patch, as I mentioned, or help diagnosing issue. So if someone's reports an issue, help them sort of diagnose their problem. Writing a test. Documentation updates, so you don't need to be particularly technical, but if you need help getting documentation up to date, that's a major thing. Translations, again, Drupal being mostly multilingual, we're always looking for people who speak and be a different language to provide translations for different strings within the UI. Or just test a new release. Also, write a blog post if you've tested out a module, tested out something. Write a blog post or record a screencast about it. So the various different types of contribution that aren't particularly related to writing code. In terms of finding something to work on, I'd suggest starting with something small. When we do live commits at DrupalCon, there's sometimes just simple as changing CSS comments, that type of thing. You're not going to rewrite the whole entity system or something within one session, especially if it's your first time contributing. So start with something small just to get used to the process and figure out how we do things. In Drupal.org, we've got a novice tag. So within our issue queue, we've got this advanced search. Issue tags is one thing we can filter on. We've got one called novice, which I don't really agree with the word usage particularly, but it's first-time contributors, essentially, rather than novices. I've seen reference to up for grabs and first-timers only tags mentioned on GitHub. I haven't found many examples of them being used on any large projects yet, but I've found sites like yourfirstpr.github.io and first-timers only who reference these additional tags. And I think also, particularly within the Drupal community, I know we've got particular tags. So if you've got particular skill around writing tests, there's a tag that says needs tests. If you're if you're writing a patch that needs to be re-rolled, so the patch no longer applies to the latest head version of core, you need to update that patch, and there's a tag for that. So that's been my thing lately, is jumping into modules or my own modules and just writing tests for the existing functionality. In terms of making changes, there's 2 main sort of workflows for making changes. Drupal, we still tend to use patches, at least for now. So you tend to have one canonical version of each module. You clone the repository. You commit your changes locally. Create a patch file. So essentially, you run a git diff or a git format patch command that gives you your changes in a text file. You upload it to an issue queue and it gets reviewed. Or if you're using like a GitHub type thing, you have pull requests, which you do tend to get multiple versions of. So you get the one main repository, and then if I want to make a change, I'd fork it and I get my own version of the repository. So everybody has a separate version, mostly. So yeah, you fork the repository, you commit your changes, you create a pull request in this case, and it gets reviewed. And hopefully what you get is something like this that says your change has been merged into the main branch. This was a thing I did for Reveal.js whilst writing this presentation, which was quite cool. So just a couple of takeaways. Reviewers and maintainers aren't scary, honest. Like, we're all very approachable, and we're still people at the end of the day. I was particularly worried initially about, like, I don't know, I'm scared of, I'm not sure why, but yeah, again, we're not scary, we're very approachable people. People reviewing the code, not reviewing you. So if people are maybe suggesting a better way of doing something, don't take it personally. They're not attacking you as such. They're just suggesting a better way of maybe writing the code. Not everything will be accepted. I've written various patches and they've maybe come back and said, that's not the way we want this project to go. Or I was working on a patch for a module and it was changing a z-index value in CSS and they got rejected and said they wouldn't fix it. It's one line, it's one number's a change, but each module in that case is its own project, so it's the maintainer's discretion of whether it gets accepted or not. But if it's not accepted, don't be disheartened and find something else. Different projects have different workflows, so particularly on various projects on GitHub, you might commit to the master branch if you're doing Symfony. If you're doing Laravel, I might go onto a develop branch or something, for instance. So just be aware of different workflows. README files are the main thing, or there's contributing.md files, mostly in GitHub, that sort of give you steps to how to contribute to that particular project. I'd always suggest to engage with the community. So I found a big advantage to going to Drupal events and PHP events, and then if I'm working on a particular patch, I've put a face to a name. So I can then look at someone in an issue queue and go, oh yeah, I've met that person, I know what their specialty is, or that thing I found it's not just blue letters on the screen anymore. I'm more aware of the person behind it and I know that particular person. And again, I'd always encourage to contribute in person if possible. Say it's code sprints, so especially DrupalCamp Bristol, we always have a sprint on the Sunday with mentors. So again, it's always great to contribute in person, get around a table, work through things as a team, find your crowd, and nice buzz and momentum will start to happen then in that case. That's it. If you've got any questions, I'm on hold of it because I know we're off to the pub. But yeah, if anyone does have questions, then yes.
A very direct sort of question about pull requests on GitHub. I've taken ages, but I've finally done a tiny little addition to a third-party library, and I'm looking to do something a bit bigger, which is essentially adding support for another platform to that library. Okay. What I wanted to do was, I've got the fork of it, I wanted to treat that as my own sort of master, fork off, do things, sorry, not fork off, branch off, do things, pull request in, which is my normal workflow. That's a typical GitHub workflow. But I found that as a fork, you can't do that. The moment you hit pull request, that's it going back to the main thing. So I wondered if you had a workflow for kind of maintaining, as it were, your own master until you're ready to put the whole thing in as a pull request.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so I've had that. So each, as I said, each project may take it slightly differently. So some maybe will use a master branch, some may use a development branch, some will have different releases. But then if you fork the project, it's sort of on yourself then to ensure it's up to date with the canonical version. So you're always then having to pull. So if you've cloned your repository, you'll have yours maybe as origin. You'd set the canonical one as something maybe called upstream or whatever. And it's up to you then to merge those changes back in or rebase those changes in to make sure that yours is working what you're writing is compatible with what's upstream, essentially.
Because it's quite a large piece of work to do, it's not just a small bit. I would tend to, if I was writing my own project on something that's not forked, I would tend to do a branch for a feature, add the feature PR in, even if I'm only reviewing my own stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'd go in and out like that, but that's the thing I see you can't do, and I wondered whether there is a way of doing it.
Well, your workflow is completely correct. All the open source projects I run on GitHub work the way you're talking about. So you fork my project, you work in your own branch on your own project, you commit to your own branch, you don't raise a pull request. You don't need to do that till you're happy. When you raise a pull request, you raise it against my fork, and then I get the pull request over. But yeah, you certainly should work in your own branch.
And I was wondering within my own branch whether I should do sub-branch off for a feature and then straight back into that branch rather than...
Yes, you can. Your problem is if your feature is too big, it will be a nightmare to merge. If someone comes to me with a 3,000–4,000 line PR, it's going to be months before it gets committed because I just don't have that much free time to merge it. You're better off raising an issue on the project, explaining what you're trying to do, and then agreeing the smallest possible change to get into the master branch, get into the master project, and then build on top of that one. Okay. If you can.
Yeah.
It has to be a massive, great big land.
Yeah.
And work with the project maintainer before you write it, because they're going to not be happy.
But fortunately, there's a conversation open already, so and it was them that raised the issue. So. But that's a good idea, doing it in small pieces.
Small as possibly, yeah. That works for all open source projects.
Yeah.
Far easier to get committed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. No, that's fine. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, I tend to also work on a branch per issue sort of workflow, just for sanity, really. And if you switch between projects, then yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, what Rob said. Yes.
What would you do when you're trying to build up your portfolio of open source? But the ways that people merge branches, like they rebase in, and they usually check out branches, rebase them, and then close your pull request, so it looks like it's being denied. But your changes are in the code base, but your commits aren't in there, so you can rebase.
They're doing it wrong. Yeah, they're doing it wrong. Yeah, it doesn't sound like the ideal workflow to me.
So I've got about 3 or 4 pull requests that have been merged into the Symfony code base, but none of them appear as make me a contributor.
I'd raise an issue in the Symfony main issue tracker and just say this is not acceptable. If you want to ping me to get involved as well. Basically, they're violating your copyright because you submit a pull request on the basis that you're going to be attributed as the author. They're taking your work and not giving you attribution as the author for that work.
You might also find that if you rebase down to one commit and then PR your one commit, it just gets merged. True. Really, because a fair few projects have where every single pull request becomes a single commit onto their master branch when it's branched out because they like clean histories and things like that. Yeah. So if that is their process and you're providing 15, 20 commits, then they're going to rebase it down for you, especially now there's a button in GitHub to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe, if you read their contributing documentation, do they have anything about this in there?
They have, but some pull requests get merged in and contribute to others don't. It depends which person is merging it.
Right, yeah, in that case I'd raise, I don't know if I'd raise an issue, but I'll probably find their Slack channel or their RC channel and ask someone what's going on and why. There's probably reasons. It might just probably because
somebody needs a bit of training. Somebody needs a bit of training on if the pull request isn't acceptable and it's too many commits, tell the person to.
That's the way Fabian always does it.
It's all well and good asking people who use open source to contribute back. Isn't it time that we started asking companies who are making large amounts of money to pony up some money for open source development?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I mean, I'm trying to push it with my company now, is trying to get some allocated time for those of us who do maintain modules and various packages to, yeah, give us time to in order to do it. And we had, yeah, one code sprint for our company a few weeks ago, probably another one coming up now. Particularly within, I know I'm more aware of it, I guess, within Drupal land, but I know, yeah, there's people who've written blog posts lately about they're giving more time to developers to work on their modules and open source projects, partly because we've got the new system in place where if it's on company time, we can actually attribute the company. And now if you go onto the Drupal marketplace, they're all listed by their contribution. So essentially, if they're giving them time, they show up higher. So it's much easier sell for me. Whereas a year or two ago, there was nothing. I do work on maybe on company time and then leave the company, move somewhere else. There's nothing then that shows that the company dedicated anything towards it. Whereas now that will continue to be marked against the company and they'll be ranked accordingly. So it's much easier now for us to try and sell it to the company by using that method. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, I'm always trying to get more time to contribute to open source. And we do have various companies, again, particularly within what I'm aware of within Drupal, who do have core maintainers on staff just to actually work on core. We've got one of our guys who's been working on it for about a year solid now, just working on Drupal 8 workflow functionality on company time, which is pretty awesome. Any more? Cool. All right. Thanks so much.